Not ashamed of the gospel. Romans 1:14-17. As Paul began his grand epistle to the Romans, he wrote of his desire to see them. His desire to see them was related to the gospel, which he served as an apostle of Christ. The good news concerning Jesus, of which he was not ashamed. Are we ever ashamed of the gospel of Christ? Embarrassed to tell others about Jesus? Could this be a reason why many are not active in personal evangelism? Perhaps by examining how and why Paul was not ashamed of the gospel, we might be more diligent in our efforts to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Number 1. Paul was not ashamed of the gospel. How he was not ashamed. He felt obligated to preach the gospel to everyone. Romans 1:14. I am debtor both to the Greeks, and to the barbarians, both to the wise, and to the unwise. His obligation due partly to favor God had shown him. He was ready to preach the gospel in Rome. Whatever opportunity was given him, he would take it. Romans 1:15. So, as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also. Even though his preference was to preach where Jesus had not been proclaimed before. Paul showed that he was not ashamed by his willingness and preparedness to preach the gospel anytime and anywhere. Why he was not ashamed. It is the power of God to salvation. For everyone who believes, both Jew and Greek or Gentiles. Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believeth, to the Jew first, and also to the Greek. For it tells of Christ, the power of God and wisdom of God. It reveals the righteousness of God in salvation. Romans 1:17. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. How the just shall live by faith. How God is both just and the justifier of those who believe in Jesus. Because of its power and message, Paul was not ashamed to preach the gospel to anyone willing to listen. From Paul, then, we should note several reasons why. Number 2. We should not be ashamed of the gospel. The gospel remains the same. It is still God's power to save. Romans 10:17. So then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. The power to produce faith in the hearts of those who hear it. The power to produce fruit in those who hear and know the truth. The passing of time has not weakened the power and message of the gospel of Christ. The need remains the same. Souls are in need of salvation. All have sinned. Romans 3:23. For all have sinned, and come short of the glory of God, and the wages of sin is death. Romans 6:23. The passing of time has not lessened the need and scope of the gospel of Christ. From the example of Paul, we can know the proper attitude and conduct of. Number 3. Those not ashamed of the gospel will feel a sense of obligation to God who saved them. Are we not thankful for what God has done for us? Will this not affect how we live our lives? Galatians 2:20. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh I live by the faith of the Son of God, who loved me, and gave himself for me. To those who are lost. Are we not concerned about their eternal destiny should they die in their sins? Will this not move us to do something? Those not ashamed of the gospel will feel an obligation similar to Paul's. Romans 1:14. Will make themselves ready to share the gospel as they have opportunity. If uncertain what to say, they will learn it, even relearn it. They will not rest until they have found some method, aids, or tools, whereby they can communicate the gospel to others. Then they will be looking for open doors to teach others. Those not ashamed of the gospel will make themselves ready like Paul. Let us do a recap. Not ashamed of the gospel. Romans 1:14-17. Number 1. Paul was not ashamed of the gospel. How he was not ashamed. He felt obligated to preach the gospel to everyone. Romans 1:14. He was ready to preach the gospel in Rome. Romans 1:15. Why he was not ashamed. It is the power of God to salvation. Romans 1:16. It reveals the righteousness of God in salvation. Romans 1:17. Number 2. We should not be ashamed of the gospel. The gospel remains the same. Romans 10:17. The need remains the same. Romans 3:23. Number 3. Those not ashamed of the gospel. In our conclusion, are you ashamed of the gospel of Christ? You may be, if you are not. You have no reason to be ashamed, it is still the same gospel. with power to save the souls of men, revealing the wonderful righteousness of God to save men. May we never be ashamed of the gospel, or of Jesus himself. Mark 8:38 says, "For whoever is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him the Son of Man also will be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels."